They fed my homemade pumpkin risotto to the dog, literally, and every year they made sure my dishes never made it to the table. So this Thanksgiving, I served them something unforgettable, and the real kicker, it was their own recipe. If you've ever been disrespected and underestimated by family, you're going to love how this story ends. Smash that like button, subscribe for more satisfying justice, and comment below your favorite revenge meal. Let's get into it.
My name is Talia Morgan, and food has always been my love language. I grew up in a small townhouse just outside of Boston, the only child of two relentlessly practical academics, Dad a historian, Mom a chemistry professor, who believed dinner was just fuel, not ritual. Most nights growing up, dinner was functional. Lentil soup in Tupperware, reheated stir-fry, toast and eggs. And I didn't resent it, not really, but maybe that's why I fell in love with food the moment I could make it my own. It wasn't just about taste, it was creation, care, beauty, memory. At 17, I left home to study culinary arts in Paris. From there, I apprenticed in Lyon, staged in New York, and eventually landed in Chicago, where I earned my stripes under the kind of chefs who made grown men cry in the walk-in. I worked long hours, bled on cutting boards, burned through shoes on slippery kitchen floors, but I loved every second. I wasn't just good at cooking, I was built for it. By the time I met Ethan, my husband, I was running private events for top clients, designing tasting menus, and teaching upscale classes on the side. He was charming, a Southern boy with a warm smile and quiet ambition. We clicked immediately. Me, the introverted fireball, him, the steady hand. He didn't care that I could outcook him 10 times over, or at least I thought he didn't. But then I met his family. A Southern dynasty, 3 generations deep in Atlanta. Women in monogrammed aprons, kitchens that smelled of brown sugar and fried okra, and a deep, almost mythic reverence for the book, a worn, leather-bound heirloom filled with recipes passed down from matriarchs long gone. It was their history, their standard, their weapon. From day one, I was an outsider. Not because I didn't try. I brought dishes to every gathering: pumpkin risotto with fried sage, bourbon bread pudding with vanilla bean custard, crab-stuffed mushrooms drizzled in garlic butter. But somehow, they always ended up forgotten in the fridge or left untouched. Once, my butternut squash bisque mysteriously spoiled and got fed to the family golden retriever. They never said it directly. They didn't have to. The message was clear. We already have a chef. Her name is Grandma Nell. It wasn't about the food, it was about the legacy, and I hadn't earned my place in it. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their approval, but every time I saw that recipe book, carefully handled, whispered over like scripture, I felt something tug at me. I didn't want to own it, I didn't want to erase anyone, I just wanted to belong. But no one was offering a seat. And slowly, something inside me hardened. Not angry, not yet, but empty, hollow. Until the year it all changed. Thanksgiving in the Morgan household wasn't a meal, it was theater. The choreography began weeks in advance. Spreadsheets of seating arrangements, napkin folds tested like military formations, centerpieces rotated based on florals in bloom and who was hosting. Each woman in the family had a signature dish, a culinary fingerprint so ingrained that even a parsley garnish deviation would spark raised eyebrows and whispered judgment. And etched beside those dishes, like engravings on a gravestone, were their names. Aunt June's squash casserole, Cousin Laura's green bean almondine, Grandma Nell's pecan tart, the jewel of the dessert table and the holy grail of page 43. Everyone was immortalized in that sacred recipe book. Except me. I wasn't even a post-it note in the margin. For years, I played nice, bit my tongue, downplayed my credentials like they were a dirty secret. I let them mistake my restraint for ignorance, my silence for submission. But when my mother-in-law called this year, her voice dripping with artificial sweetener, and said, Talia, darling, just one dessert this year. Something light, okay? I heard it loud and clear. Stay in your corner. Don't outshine the legacy. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe spite, maybe that stubborn little girl who once cooked scrambled eggs over a camp stove just to prove she could, refused to stay quiet this time. I said, of course, just one dessert. And I began to plan. Months earlier, during one of those brunches where everyone migrated to the porch to sip mimosas and gossip, I'd stayed back to tidy up, an intentional, strategic linger. And there it was, the book, left open like an offering. I remember my pulse in my ears as I reached for my phone and quietly snapped the photo. Page 43, Grandma Nell's pecan tart. That one photo felt like contraband. I didn't intend to copy it. That would be easy and beneath me. No, I wanted to elevate it, to speak their language fluently, but with my own accent, to show them I could play by their rules and still win. I started with the crust, almond and brown butter, flaky enough to crack under a spoon, but rich enough to melt into memory. I made a bourbon caramel glaze that took 6 attempts to perfect, tweaking the temperature and timing until it was liquid velvet. I roasted pecans with a hint of smoked salt, then candied them and arranged them in perfect spirals across the tart's golden surface, like edible lace. It was art, precision and passion, a challenge accepted and executed. But I wasn't done. I designed place cards, heavy cardstock, gold script, subtle but firm, one for every guest, and beneath each name, the same phrase: some traditions deserve to be shared. Not stolen, not gatekept, shared. I had them printed, trimmed, and packed before the tart even cooled, and with every step, I felt something uncoil inside me. This wasn't just about a pie. It was about taking up space at a table that had kept shrinking every time I got near it. I didn't tell Ethan, not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed this to be mine, unfiltered, unapologetic, unsoftened by anyone else's good intentions. As I packed the tart into its carrier and slid the place cards into my tote, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not arrogance, not nerves, just clarity. I wasn't coming to beg for inclusion anymore. I was coming to serve notice. I arrived with the kind of precision one might expect from a trained chef on her most important service. Hair-pinned, apron spotless, not a trace of flour under my nails. I looked the part, controlled, confident, poised, but inside my heartbeat thumped against my ribs like a war drum. The dining room was already set, gleaming. Southern perfection in every inch. Golden-rimmed plates, vintage linens embroidered with initials, tall vases of magnolia leaves and ivory roses that practically demanded admiration. It was the same every year, and still they fawned over it as though seeing the arrangement for the first time. I set the tart down in the kitchen, carefully removing the insulated lid like I was lifting the shroud off a painting. Even in the dim overhead light, it shimmered. Pecans, lacquered in bourbon glaze, spiraled so precisely you'd think I'd used a compass. I took a breath, exhaled purpose, and walked to the dining table to place the cards. Each name nestled between a wine glass and a folded napkin, each name followed by that one line, printed in crisp gold ink. Some traditions deserve to be shared. Barbara, my mother-in-law, was the first to notice. She froze, blinked, and gave me a look that was half surprise, half restrained disapproval. "Place cards! How quaint," she said, drawing out the word like it was laced with mildew. But she didn't remove them. That was win number 1. The meal unfolded as expected. Buttered everything, twice-baked traditions, casseroles buried under layers of crispy onions. I said little, kept pace with small talk, passed platters, pretended not to notice the way Barbara still accidentally skipped my hand during the rolls. But I didn't care. I was counting down. Dessert was always served with ceremony, a reveal, the final act. Everyone had their favorites: Margaret's lemon chess pie, Aunt Doreen's hummingbird cake, and of course, the revered pecan tart. But this year, there was only one tart. Mine. I walked it out like it was a debutante, centered it at the head of the dessert table, angled the serving knife just right, then stepped back. There was a hush, followed by a flutter of camera clicks, phones lifted, brows lifted. Even Laura, who once scoffed at my chef plating nonsense, tilted her head and muttered, "It's stunning." And then came the first slice. It was Margaret's husband, Dean, who dove in first. No surprise there. He was always eager, rarely civil. One bite, then stillness. Brow raised, chew, swallow, then, "That's insane." The dominoes fell. One by one, plates were filled, forks clinked, and slowly the room turned to stunned silence. Not the kind of polite silence that fills a room when people are figuring out how to compliment you without sounding too impressed, but the kind of silence that happens when something seismic has shifted. Eyes met across the table. I could see them working it out. This taste they recognized, but didn't. This familiarity wrapped in something bolder, deeper, unexpected. Then it came. The whispers, the awe, the loss of pretense. Oh my God. Better than Nell's. What is this crust? Forks pointed, spoons hovered midair. Even Barbara, stone-faced Barbara, had a bite poised, though she hadn't tasted it yet. I stood then, slowly, deliberately. The fork in my hand clicked against the plate as I set it down. I let the moment breathe, let the tension stretch like a sugar ribbon pulled taut. And then I said it, calmly, clearly. "That's actually from your family recipe book, page 43. I just added a little love." Time didn't stop, but it staggered. You could practically hear the record scratch in everyone's heads. I watched as recognition dawned on Barbara's face like a slow sunrise she didn't want to see. She blinked once, twice. Her fork didn't move. Her hand, once graceful, now trembled just enough to betray her. She didn't speak, didn't scoff, just stared. The room held its breath, half of them unsure if this was a confession or a declaration, the other half wondering what page 43 even meant. Ethan looked at me, mouth open slightly, not in disapproval, but in disbelief. He knew. Or maybe he didn't know the specifics, but he knew this was something long overdue. Still, no one moved. No one filled the silence. It hung thick, spiced with caramel and tension. Barbara finally lowered her fork, untouched tart on the plate. She leaned back into her chair with the grace of someone composing themselves after a public stumble, eyes forward, shoulders tight. But I didn't sit down. I didn't need to. Because from across the table, Grandma Nell, white-haired, eagle-eyed, wrapped in a shawl and authority, stood, steady, silent, and started walking toward me. You could have heard a pin drop. Barbara's expression didn't change at first, just that eerie stillness, like she'd short-circuited. Her wine glass hovered in midair, a tremor barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I was. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Her eyes didn't blink. It was as if she were seeing not me, but a glitch in the matrix, a daughter-in-law who refused to color inside the borders she had drawn so meticulously for years. The tart on her plate sat untouched, a glossy, golden half-moon that had somehow thrown the whole room into a mild state of existential crisis. Someone coughed. A fork clinked against china. In the far corner, a baby babbled, the sound oddly jarring in the sudden stillness. And then Barbara moved. She didn't speak, didn't argue, just sat back down slowly, smoothing the hem of her blouse like it gave her something to do with her hands. Her wine glass landed softly on the linen tablecloth, barely making a sound. She stared straight ahead and didn't touch the rest of her slice. Across the table, someone exhaled in relief. And then a chair scraped. Grandma Nell rose. For a woman nearing 90, her movements still carried weight. Not in a physical sense, she was delicate now, bones like fine china. But her presence, the gravitas of someone who had weathered too many Thanksgivings to be fazed by a little kitchen rebellion, drew the room's focus like a magnet. She walked slowly, but with purpose, her soft shoes making almost no sound on the hardwood floor. Every eye followed her. I felt the room shift again, this time the kind of shift that cracks tension wide open. She stopped in front of me, took my hand. Her palm was warm, papery, familiar. She looked up, because yes, I'd somehow grown taller than the family matriarch, and gave me the kind of look people usually reserve for heirlooms or old photos they thought were lost. Then she asked softly, "That was your spin, wasn't it?" I nodded. No words, just the truth in that gesture. She smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and said, "Then it's time the book had a new page." That was it. But it was everything. The room didn't erupt into applause. This wasn't a movie. No swelling strings or cinematic lighting. Just silence that no longer carried judgment, only the fragile buzz of a new order being born. Some people nodded. Some avoided my eyes, but no one said a word against it. Because when Grandma Nell speaks, even Barbara listens. Eventually, people went back to their desserts, conversations picking up again in hushed, cautious tones. A few more compliments came my way, now even more hesitant, as if everyone was recalibrating how to treat me. I wasn't just the daughter-in-law with quirky recipes or restaurant flair. I was now the one who had successfully touched the untouchable. Barbara never looked at me again that night. She didn't have to. Her silence had said enough. But the air around me? Different now. I had shifted something tectonic, pressed against years of smile and swallow it, and finally cracked through. Later, while I helped in the kitchen, unloading pie servers and rinsing plates, I overheard snippets. Laura whispering to Doreen, "I thought she was just showing off, but it was damn good." Uncle Tom muttering something about bourbon doing wonders. Even the cousins, in their teenage apathy, had scraped their plates clean. And somewhere between the third rinse and fourth drying, I realized I wasn't exhausted. Normally, by this point in the evening, I'd be counting the minutes until I could peel off my polite smile and crawl into sweatpants. But tonight, there was a hum under my skin. Not adrenaline, not spite, something calmer, a steadying sense of reclaiming my voice in a house that had, year after year, to tune me out. As people said goodbyes and headed for their coats, Grandma Nell lingered near the foyer. She was holding a tiny saucer, a few crumbs still clinging to it. She caught my eye as I slipped my shoes on by the stairs and gave a single, deliberate nod. That nod carried more than a decade's worth of acceptance, more than 1,000 passive-aggressive remarks ever could have undone. Outside, the air was crisp. My breath fogged slightly as I walked to the car, tart dish covered and tucked into the passenger seat beside me like a quiet partner in crime. Inside the house, the family machine reset for another year. Dishes stacked, leftovers packed, conversations already blending into new gossip. But I wasn't in that machinery anymore. I had broken it. Just enough. The tart had been a scalpel disguised as dessert. Surgical, silent, sweet. No explosion, no drama. Just the fire alarm silence that follows when you realize the smoke wasn't just for show. And Barbara? She would never admit what had happened. She didn't have to. Her plate, still half full, would be enough of a monument. But Nell saw it all. And that mattered more than anyone's approval. That night, I went home and placed the tart plate on the counter. I didn't even bother rinsing it yet. I just stood there, apron still tied, heels kicked off, staring at the speckled remnants. Victory didn't always look like a celebration. Sometimes it looked like crumbs. Sweet, unapologetic crumbs. The next morning, the sun came through my kitchen windows like it knew something good had happened. The tart plate was still sitting on the counter, its glaze dried and crumbs crystallized like amber in a museum case. I ran my fingers over it absent-mindedly while sipping coffee, the text from Grandma Nell glowing on my phone screen. "Come by tomorrow. We need to talk pastry." It wasn't just the words, it was who they came from. Nell didn't text often, and when she did, it was usually to alert us about the changing status of her rose bushes or remind everyone that the local butcher was closing early. This wasn't that. This was something else. When I arrived at her house, she was already at the door, as if she'd been waiting. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just smiled, stepped aside, and guided me through her impossibly tidy hallway to the dining room table. Waiting there was a single object, a leather-bound book. Not the book. This one was new. It smelled like fresh paper and time yet to be spent. She slid it toward me, her fingers lingering on the edge before she let go. On the cover, my name. Inside, a title page, Talia's Editions for Future Generations. She watched my face carefully, searching for something. Maybe disbelief, maybe pride. I turned the page and saw it. My tart. Not just mentioned, but revered. Page 1, almond-crusted pecan tart. Thanksgiving, year 1. In her handwriting, with notes in the margin. To be made annually, unless someone finds a way to make it better. Good luck. I didn't mean to cry, but the moment cracked something inside me that had been under pressure for years. All the holidays I'd spent biting my tongue, trying not to flinch at backhanded compliments. All the dishes I'd brought that went untouched or were quietly relocated to the kitchen for later. All the efforts that had felt invisible. It all came out in one quiet, cathartic breath. She cried too. And then we just sat there. Two women separated by a generation, but suddenly aligned in the most meaningful way. Through food, through tradition, through an unspoken understanding that inclusion isn't always granted, it's earned. Or sometimes it's claimed. That afternoon, she told me stories I'd never heard, about how the original book had started with her and her sisters, one of whom had moved to New Mexico and now cooked everything with chili powder. About how Barbara had married into the family and insisted on alphabetizing the recipes, as if logic could contain legacy. About the fight over a green bean casserole in '97. About how she herself had once felt like an outsider, until she made a lamb roast that Grandpa Nell couldn't stop talking about for 2 years straight. Legacy, she explained, was just a fancy word for love that lasted longer than memory. And food? That was how you made it tangible. She showed me the empty pages in the back of the book. Dozens of them, blank but expectant, waiting for new stories, new recipes, new contributions that didn't need permission to exist. And in that silence between us, I understood. She wasn't just giving me a compliment. She was giving me a seat. Not just at the table, but in the lineage. I stayed longer than I meant to. We drank tea, ate shortbread, talked about pie crust as if it were philosophy. When I finally left, the air felt different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. Outside, the wind was picking up, scattering the last of the autumn leaves. I held the book tightly to my chest, the leather warming in the crook of my arm like something alive. When I got home, I placed it on the shelf next to my cookbooks. Not with the everyday ones, not next to the dog-eared copies or spiral-bound notebooks. No, this one got its own space. Sacred. Clean. I didn't open it again right away. I didn't need to. I already knew the first page by heart. Sometimes people don't want to make room for you at the table. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be there. Sometimes you just have to bring a dish so unforgettable, they have to rewrite the book.
If this story gave you chills or made you hungry, smash that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. What's your most delicious act of revenge? Drop it in the comments. And remember, every tradition has a beginning. Why not let it start with you?